My name is Elra Quinn. I'm 30 years old, and I need to tell you about the night I walked into my parents' house and found them lying on the floor, because what came after changed everything I thought I knew about family, love, and betrayal. But to understand how deep this goes, you need to know who my parents are first. My parents built everything from nothing. My father worked double shifts for 20 years so we could have a house, a future, a name worth something. My mother cooked every meal from scratch, kept every birthday, remembered every small thing. They weren't wealthy people, but they were good people. The kind of good that's hard to find. My brother and I grew up in that house. Same table, same food, same prayers every night before bed. He was older. He married young, a woman I never fully warmed to, though I could never explain exactly why. Something in her eyes, maybe. The way she smiled a second too late. I told myself I was being unfair, that I was projecting. That family is family. So when my brother called me one afternoon and said, "We're going on a short trip, just a few days out of the country. Mom and Dad will be alone. Visit them when you're free," I thought nothing of it. I should have. It had been months since I'd last visited. Life does that, it fills up with noise and errands and excuses until suddenly you're a stranger to the people who raised you. That afternoon, something shifted in me. No more excuses. I wanted to sit with them. Drink tea, talk about nothing important, just be there. The drive to their house felt ordinary. I had no reason to feel uneasy. But somewhere between the front gate and the door, my body picked up on something my mind hadn't registered yet. The house was too quiet. My mother always had the television on, some drama she'd seen a dozen times, comfortable background noise. My father was always either in the garden or calling out to her about something. There was always life in that house. Sound, warmth. That afternoon, nothing. Mom. I pushed the door open slowly. Dad. Silence answered me. My footsteps felt loud against the floor as I stepped inside. The air smelled normal. The kitchen light was on. Everything looked exactly as it always did. But something invisible pressed against my chest, something I couldn't name. And then I turned the corner. They were on the floor. Both of them. Still. For a moment, and I don't know how long it actually was, I couldn't move. My brain simply refused to process what my eyes were showing it. It was like looking at a photograph of something that couldn't be real. Mom. I whispered it first, like a question, like maybe saying it quietly would make it less serious. Then I was running. I dropped to my knees beside her and touched her face, and it was cold, not room temperature cold, but wrong cold. And that's when the panic cracked through everything like a dam breaking. Dad, wake up, Dad, please. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock my phone. I dialed the ambulance, and I don't remember what I said. I remember crying. I remember saying please. I remember the seconds stretching into something unbearable as I held my mother's hand and begged her to squeeze back. She didn't. The hospital was a blur of fluorescent lights and running footsteps and doors closing in my face. They wheeled my parents away, and I stood in a corridor alone, suddenly aware that I didn't know a single thing about what had just happened. I called my brother, no answer. I called again, no answer. I called his wife, nothing. I stood there hitting redial over and over, and with every unanswered ring, the unease in my stomach grew into something darker. Where are you? Why aren't you picking up? Relatives arrived after a while. I had called one of them in a panic, and we sat together in that waiting room, not saying much, just waiting, staring at the doors the doctors had disappeared behind. When the doctor finally came out, I stood up so fast I nearly knocked over my chair. Are they okay? What happened? Please tell me they're okay. He looked at me for a moment, not the look a doctor gives when things are fine. They are alive, he said, but their condition is critical. I exhaled, then he said the next part. They've been poisoned. The word landed like something physical. I actually stepped backward. Poisoned. Not a fall, not a heart attack, not something the body did on its own. Someone had done this to them. Who, I thought, looking around at my relatives, at the walls, at nothing. Who would do this? There was no break-in. Nothing was stolen. They don't have enemies. They're just my parents. My brother arrived that same night, red-eyed and shaken, his wife close behind him. He looked exactly like a man who had just received devastating news, pale, trembling, reaching for me with both arms. "This isn't possible," he kept saying. "They were fine when we left. They were completely fine." His wife cried softly. Into a tissue. I held them both. I believed them completely. I believed everything. The police came the next day and asked the kinds of questions that felt surreal in the context of my family. When did you last speak to them? Who has access to the house? Has anyone visited recently? Is anything missing? No forced entry, no robbery, no strangers, nothing. My brother answered every question calmly, offered his travel records without hesitation, showed his phone, cooperated fully. He seemed like exactly what he appeared to be, a worried son with nothing to hide. The investigation stalled. Days passed. My parents remained in critical condition. We took shifts at the hospital, me during the day, my brother and his wife in the evenings. We spoke in low voices. We drank bad vending machine coffee. We didn't talk about suspects because we couldn't think of any. But my husband was thinking. He's always been the quieter one, the one who observes before he speaks. While the rest of us were spiraling in grief and confusion, he was watching, piecing things together. One evening he sat beside me in the corridor and said, "There was no break-in, no outsider." I looked at him. That means whatever happened came from inside the house. A chill moved through me slowly, from my spine outward. But how and who? I asked. He stood up. "I need to check something. I'll tell you when I'm sure." He walked away, and I sat there watching him go, and for the first time, I understood that I was genuinely afraid of the answer. The medical report changed everything. My husband came back the following morning with that expression, the one that tells you what's coming is going to hurt. "It wasn't a one-time poisoning," he said. "This wasn't sudden. The toxicology report says it was slow-acting, administered over multiple days, possibly weeks. Small doses, consistent, intentional." I heard every word. I understood every word. And still my mind fought it. Someone was giving it to them, regularly. Someone they let into their home. Someone they trusted. Someone who sat at their table and watched them eat and came back the next day and did it again. "How?" I whispered. "They don't let strangers in. They grow their own herbs. My mother makes everything from scratch." "Tell me," he said carefully. "What did they eat every single day without fail?" I thought about it. My parents were creatures of habit. Same tea, same routine, same breakfast. And then it hit me. The pickle jar. My mother's homemade pickle, the one she made in batches and kept on the third shelf of the kitchen cabinet. The one my father ate every single morning with his bread. The one that had sat in that cabinet for weeks. The one no one would ever think to question. "The jar," I said. My husband nodded. My parents, it turned out, had installed hidden cameras in the house months ago. A quiet security measure after a neighbor was robbed. They never mentioned it to anyone, just put them in and forgot about them. They had never imagined they'd need them for this. We drove to the house in silence. I don't think either of us spoke a word the entire way. When we walked inside, my husband went straight to the kitchen, opened the cabinet, and held up the pickle jar like a question. Then he opened the footage on his phone. The timestamp read 9 days earlier. The kitchen, same tiles, same light, same shelf. And there they were. My brother and his wife. Standing in my parents' kitchen like it was the most ordinary thing in the world, because it was ordinary for them. They lived there. They knew every corner of that house. They knew the routines. They knew the pickle jar. On the footage, my brother glanced around the kitchen once. Just once. Then his wife reached into her pocket and removed a small packet. She opened the jar. She tipped the contents in. She stirred carefully. She placed it back on the exact same shelf in the exact same position. Then they both walked out of the kitchen, and you could hear them laughing about something in the hallway. Laughing. I watched the video twice. I don't know why I watched it twice. Maybe I was hoping it would change. It didn't. My legs stopped working. I sat down on the kitchen floor, the same floor my mother had mopped 1,000 times, and I cried in a way I didn't know I was capable of. Not loud, not dramatic, just broken. Completely, quietly broken. Why? I kept asking. Why? My husband sat beside me on that floor. He didn't rush the answer. Property, he finally said. If your parents were gone, everything goes to him. He knew that. He planned for that. The same brother who had called me, who had said, Mom and Dad will be alone, just visit them when you're free. He had sent me there, not out of care, not to check on them. He sent me there knowing I would find them, knowing I would call the ambulance, because if they simply disappeared, questions would be asked, but if they were found by the grieving daughter while he was Felly out of the country with receipts and records, and a perfect alibi. He had thought of everything. Everything except the cameras. The police took the footage. The toxicology reports confirmed the substance. My brother and his wife were arrested within 48 hours. There was no dramatic scene, no confrontation, no final look between us. I wasn't there when it happened. I didn't want to be. My parents regained consciousness 11 days after I found them. I was there when my mother opened her eyes. I held her hand so tight she probably couldn't feel her fingers. She looked at me like she was confused, like she wasn't sure how much time had passed or why the lights were so bright. When she was strong enough to ask questions, I told her the truth. I didn't want to, I wanted to protect them from it, but they deserved the truth. My father was the one who broke me in the end, not with shouting, not with tears. He just turned his face toward the window and said, very quietly, "Our own son." 3 words, barely above a whisper. I have never felt a silence heavier than the one that followed. The case went to court. The footage, the reports, the chemical analysis, everything was presented. There was no reasonable defense. My brother sat through it quietly. I don't know what he was thinking. I don't know if I want to. The verdict came on an ordinary Tuesday morning. Life imprisonment, attempted murder. The courtroom was still when the judge spoke. Afterwards, people stood and gathered their things and the day continued, because the world doesn't pause for your grief. It just keeps moving and you have to move with it. 3 months have passed. My parents are home now. They move more slowly than before. They laugh less. There are long silences in that house that weren't there before, not the comfortable kind, but the kind that sits in the spaces where something used to be. They are trying. Every day they are trying. So am I. I still go and visit every week now. I sit with them in the kitchen, the same kitchen, and we drink tea and sometimes we talk and sometimes we just sit. The pickle jar is gone. My mother doesn't make it anymore. She doesn't say why, she doesn't have to. Some things you don't recover from. You just learn to carry them differently. I think about that phone call from my brother sometimes. How normal it sounded. How completely, effortlessly normal. And I think about all the times we sat at a table together and shared food, and I never once thought to question the look in his eyes. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't announce itself. It waits, it plans. It smiles at your mother across the dinner table. And then one day, when everything is quiet and no one is watching, It pours poison into the jar.